And today's presenter, we have Charlie Banks, who is the co-founder and director of Venture South. So let's give him a round of applause.
Good morning.
Good morning.
That was weak.
You're not Charlie.
Yeah. You all are geniuses. I wanted to introduce. I'm introducing Charlie. Charlie Banks is just to give you a little bit of background on Charlie. Charlie is co-founder and managing director of Venture South, one of the country's largest early-stage investment firms. Venture South and their nearly 350 investors have invested over $40 million in 71 companies over the last 2 years. Charlie also serves as the executive director of Venture Carolina, which is a sister nonprofit organization that provides comprehensive investor and entrepreneur education. Charlie's a great person. Everybody should probably get to know him and listen to what he has to say today because it's very important. Charlie's going to be talking about what you need to do when you're approaching someone for money, how you need to be prepared. But usually about only 25% of the people who approach investors are really prepared. So pay attention today, take notes. Give Charlie a big round of applause.
Morning. All right. Well, as you mentioned, my name is Charlie Banks. I'm the co-founder and managing director of Venture South. We'll talk about a little bit about what we do and how we do it here in a minute. But first, I want to start off with a quick story of a company called Quipt. So back when 1 Million Cups was starting, I was one of the first people that really kind of started coming to it fairly regularly when it was at Kroger's Peanuts. There was probably 10 or 12 people in the room. It was me and Greg and Tom Ledbetter and Tom Peters, some others. And within the first year, I was at just a normal meeting, and a guy walked up and said, "Hey, my name is Robert, and I've got a startup in Wilmington called Quipt." I said, "Great, tell me more about it." And he told me about it. It's a B2B equipment leasing platform. And I said, "It sounds really interesting. Send me your deck, send me your executive summary. And I'll take a look, and we'll follow up with you." Did just that. Fast forward a couple months, Venture South invested $500,000 in Quipt. And it was really just because that guy got in his car and made the decision to go to another city's 1 Million Cups just to see if he could network with somebody. And he ran into Venture South. So that's a good segue into kind of how this works, why it matters, how you do it, things like that. I want this to be real conversational. This isn't just an educational session, so please just stop me at any time. If you're familiar with what we do and you want to add any color into your experience with Venture South, I know Tom Ledbetter and Tom Peters and Greg and some others and TK have been to some meetings, so feel free just to stop me and add some color to what I'm talking about. So Venture South, we are an organization that develops and manages community-based angel investment groups. So we have 12 groups throughout the Southeast, comprised of 350 individual investors. We've also raised 3 angel funds. Some news today, actually, that came out, you'll see that we just closed our 3rd fund, fully subscribed, meaning that we hit the cap of what we intended to put into that fund. So we're excited about that. We've looked at a whole lot of businesses. We consistently are taking serious 20 to 30 businesses a month. That doesn't count the ones that we don't take serious. So over the course of the amount of years we've been doing this, we've looked at over 4,000 businesses. We've had over 3,000 companies come in to pitch. And as TK mentioned, we just crossed the threshold of $40 million invested in 71 companies and over 150 different investment rounds, meaning we've written 150 different checks. We'll talk a little bit about exits. Exits are when the investors make money. So we'll talk about that in a bit. And we've been fortunate to have 19 of those where we've made money on. Our investors are right now, just on the returns we've had, We're about 3.5 times our money. We've only written off 5% of the money we've invested, which is pretty well ahead of the industry average. And last year we were recognized as a top 10 angel group in North America by the International Angel Capital Association. So pretty pumped about that. So what we're going to talk about today is I'm gonna make this into a little bit more of a flavor of what we look at, because we're a fairly typical professionally curated investment firm, meaning that we have professional managers like me that do this all day, every day. There are a lot of different types of capital providers, which we'll talk about here in a bit. But in terms of what we at Venture South invest in, the geography is effectively the Southeast. So think about Washington, D.C. to New Orleans to Miami. That's kind of our footprint. Typically, we are investing in go-to-market stage companies, meaning that you have already started earning revenue. You've at least made $1 with one customer. If you are still pre-revenue, we need you to have a very clear and articulated path to revenue. The team cannot say enough about how important the team is. So a lot of the ones we invest in are folks that have done this before. But however, the ones that have never done this, you need to make sure that we feel like that you are trustworthy, you're resourceful, you're a go-getter, you're a hustler, that you are fully committed. The team is complementary, meaning that you guys are working as a cohesive team. Market-wise, we're kind of all over the board as it relates to what we typically invest in. As I mentioned, there are a lot of groups that invest in very specific things. There's some groups that only do medical, some groups that only do ag tech, or some that only do consumer products. We're agnostic, meaning we'll look at just about everything. A couple things that it's oftentimes easier to tell you what we won't invest in. We're typically not investing in any consumer product. So if you are making a widget and plan to sell it to a consumer, we're not a good fit. Venture South isn't. There are a lot of groups that are, but we're just not. If you are a lifestyle company, meaning you're service-based, you're a restaurant, you're a franchise, you're something like that, we're not a good fit for you either. Again, there are groups that do that. We could spend all day on the structure of what we invest in. But for ease of explanation, we're taking equity in the company. We're typically taking the round, meaning that fundraise. We're typically taking a 20 to 30% equity stake in the company. So we're minority shareholders. We're not getting into day-to-day activities of your company. We are investing in you and the idea and your ability to scale the company up. So any questions on the parameters? I really, really want you guys to stop me at any time and ask questions. As I mentioned, we've seen a whole lot of pitches, and they just kind of never seem to stop. My wife, she always messes with me about, everywhere we go, I feel like she feels like there's an entrepreneur who says, hey, let me tell you about your business. Let me tell you about my business. Let me tell you about my business. Don't stop doing that, because that's the warm intro. We'll talk here in a bit. However, as I mentioned, this is really hard. This is really, really hard to do. We've only invested in 2%, approximately 2% of the companies that we've actually taken serious. So 98%, approximately 98% of the companies that we look at, we say thanks but no thanks. And that is really important for you guys to understand that as you're entering into the time frame where you're trying to attract outside capital, you need to understand our heads so that you can prepare yourself accordingly. Where we live, there's not a lot of capital. We're not Silicon Valley. We're not Boston. We're not Austin. We're not New York. The Southeast is historically, it's a little bit scarce. And we know that most startups fail. 50% of the, I'm going to show you a graph here in a bit, 50% of the companies that we invest in, we understand are likely going to fail. So in order for you guys to really stand out, you've got to build credibility. I'm going to say that in almost every slide. It is incredibly important for you to build credibility throughout the entire process of raising money from an investor. Starts with homework. You got to do your homework on yourself. What do you need? What do you truly, truly need? It's not what you think you need. It's not what you saw on Shark Tank that somebody else got. It's not what your uncle says you need. What do you truly, truly need for the company? Start there. Next thing is look at who you're trying to raise money from. What's their objective? What do they like to invest in? Look at their portfolio, the portfolio of the companies that they've invested in. What do they like? Who are their managing directors? Who are their investors? What is their geography? What do they not invest in? Find that out. And if you combine those two, that's where you need to focus. Does that make sense? And then you tailor your pitch to align with what they're looking for. Now that doesn't necessarily just mean investors. As you guys are talking to your bankers, as you're talking to your friends, families, and fools. There you go. Even the fools need attention. But as you're talking to those folks, tailor your pitch to exactly what they want. Not necessarily what they want to hear, but where they invest their money. So as I mentioned, we're angel investors. There's a couple of different things. There's a development cycle, there's a kind of a capital stack of any company. And this is what it looks like. So your first source of capital would be that seed stage. It's $1,000 to about $100,000 depending on where you are. And that comes from yourself, it comes from your credit cards, it comes from friends, families, and fools. It comes from grants, it comes from all that. So that's usually the first little bit of money that comes into your company. Later on down the stage, as you've already scaled up and you're in operations, you're doing well, you're growing, you've got growth stage capital, which is more traditional venture capital fund. Then you go out to private equity, public markets, banks, and things like that. This is where we fall. This is where Venture South, this is where the angel investors fall. This is kind of what you would see on Shark Tank, that amount of money in that $100,000 to $3 million range. Now, Venture South, the check size that we like to write initially is about $500,000 to $1.2 million. That's kind of where we like to play. If you're looking to raise, if you have a great idea and you're looking to only raise $100,000, $200,000, we're not your group. And that's the kind of things that you need to figure out when you're looking to raise money. Angel investors are individuals who invest their own money. So at Venture South, what we do is we pull together hundreds of people that are accredited, meaning that the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC, have said, for some reason, the government felt the need to say, you're able to make these kind of investments because you have a net worth of $1 million or an annual income of $200,000 or $300,000 with your spouse. So that's the accredited investor definition. All the investors in Venture South, they have to be accredited. So it's important, and we could spend all day on talking about ways that entrepreneurs get tripped up in raising money with non-accredited investors, and that's for another day. Yeah.
I know this may sound dumb, but how do you prove accreditation? Is it a card? I know this, is it a card or something?
A card.
Somebody's got to be a record somewhere to have someone walks in and say, I'm accredited to invest, how you should.
Well, as an entrepreneur, we'll back up. So the way that we prove accreditation is a self-accreditation model. That's how most of them are.
You said the government's involved in something.
Yeah, the government just wrote the definition. Yeah, so that's just the friends, families, and fools. That doesn't necessarily need to be you're accredited. I mean, you guys, I encourage you to take money from as many people as you possibly can at that early stage. If you can sell them on it and they're a fool, let them invest. I've taken fools' money. They were really big fools, but it worked out for them in the end. But nonetheless, that's just, I want to make sure that we are a group of accredited investors that invest our own money. Now, the venture capitalists, that's different. The venture capitalists are, they invest other people's money. So if all of these folks in the room gave me $100,000, I put it into a fund, I'm a VC now, and you're a limited partner in a fund. That's the VC model. We've got a blend, and I won't get into much of that, but that's typically how that works. It's really important to understand the portfolio math. And we spend a lot of time with our investors explaining this because we want them to understand that this is a risky game. as I mentioned, half the companies that we invest in are going to fail. 25% are going to return. You should return your money, and then that other 25% is where you get your returns. So if you look at this graph here, you'll see that over half the deals have failed. You need to be here. This is where you need to fall. You need to have the potential to return a 5 to 10x return on the investor's money. The process itself is important to understand as well. So it's a long, arduous process. And we're not going to go through each of these, but I just wanted to show you that this is a typical process. So pre-screening is when we will, you've kind of, the pre-step to this is an introduction to one of us where we would look at your company and we would determine whether or not it's a good fit for Venture South. If we think it does, we'll bring you into a pre-screening process where we bring you into Greenville. We put you in what's called our pitch lab, which is effectively a TV studio type atmosphere, and we're live streaming your pitch to our hundreds of investors. We usually take 1 or 2 companies a month into a formal due diligence process. Due diligence is where we peel back the covers of your company. We look at every single thing. There's 10 criteria that we look at, and I'm happy to go through that at another educational event with you guys. Talk about exactly what we're looking at, and then you go on a roadshow. So while you're in diligence, and it's taking a couple months, you're also going on a roadshow to the different angel groups that we manage. Assuming that the diligence comes out positive, you've gone the roadshow, we present the diligence to the investor base, and they say yes, we'll start collecting checks, and we combine all those checks into one hat to make the investment. We execute that, and then after that's really where the process really takes off from there. You've kind of gotten through the investment process, you've gotten your check, and now we monitor you quarterly. So we have quarterly expectations from every company that we invest in. And then we exit, well, hopefully, as opposed to shutting down. Exit's where a strategic acquirer or a bigger company, Facebook, Google, Amazon, they come in and buy you for $100 million. That's the exit. Throughout the whole process, there are a series of documents that we'll talk about that are really important. And a lot of these documents are really what gets you in the door. We've talked about the homework, the introduction, you've got an elevator pitch, the executive summary, the pitch deck. There's full suites of documents that we would need from you guys to get through. You notice there's no business plan listed here. I never read business plans. Contrary to what you may believe, we don't read business plans. We could care less what's in your business plan. We need you to be able to convey that to us. We need to be able to build credibility that you can actually execute on your business plan. The business plan is for you, not the investors. That's an internal document. That's an operational document, not an investment document. The goal at each step of these is to get invited to the next step. That's that building credibility piece. Who wants to give me their elevator pitch? Does anybody know what an elevator pitch is? Greg, give me SoCo's elevator pitch.
SoCo is a platform and a community for independent workers, creative professionals, and entrepreneurs. We create the infrastructure, the community, and the resources that you need to focus on doing investment.
That's great. I bring them out because Greg's always really good at building elevator pitches. A good one is we launched a consumer app earlier this year that helps radio shows and podcasts increase audio engagement and increase sponsorship sales. We have partnered with these folks as well as many podcasts. Earlier this launch, we launched a separate app which is generating revenue. That tells me a problem, the solution, and the model how you do it. You've got to be able to do that just like Greg is. Off the cuff, in an elevator, at 1 million cups. The last thing you need to do is corner somebody and give them your entire business model and how you're going to make money, because I promise you that happens all the time. I can give you stories after stories. I'll give you a quick one, actually. I was in Myrtle Beach at a restaurant after an event just like this. A guy with a walking cane came up and says, "Charlie, I've created the best walking cane you've ever seen. I'm going to show you how it works." And he starts hauling butt around the restaurant, just really getting it. And he came back and said, "What do you think?" I'm like, "I have no idea what just happened. I have no idea what you're doing. Why are you running around this restaurant?" So he gives me his walking cane and his business card, which is, no lie, a coin that that he's inscribed his name and number on it. Now, it worked because I'm sitting here talking about it years later, but we didn't invest in it. I say that just because I want you to understand that guy came up and said, I've created a walking stick that solves this problem. Here's my solution, and here's how I make money. Here's my coin, and here's a walking stick. We might have talked to him a little longer instead of me somewhat making fun of him years later. Hope you're not watching this. Executive summary. That is that one to 2 page. 2 page is acceptable. 1 page is ideal. That is the initial document after that warm introduction that I've said, hey, this sounds good. Send me what you've got. Send me that 1 to 2 page document. It just includes. It's just the summary of that pitch deck that we'll talk about here in a bit. Make it professional. Don't have spelling errors. Make the format right. That's a non-starter immediately. If you have spelling errors in your pitch deck or your executive summary or your email, we don't take it serious. It's like the 7th grade teacher. Just don't have that kind of stuff. Pitch deck is that 10 to 12 slides that get through exactly what you're doing. It's intended to sell, not teach, excite, not educate. That's important. Sell, not teach, excite, not educate. There's going to be a time in the process where you do teach and you do educate, but that's not in the pitch deck. And this is, by the way, this is going to be available for you guys. I know I'm skipping over a lot, so I'll make sure that TK and Greg and those folks, you'll have access to this materials moving forward.
Can you go back for a second?
Yeah, what's up?
On the excite part, just hang on that for a little bit as to why that's important.
Well, we got to be excited about what you're doing. I mean, honestly, if it's a boring delivery in terms of what you're doing, I'm not going to be excited about it. I need you to, in your elevator pitch or in your materials, get us excited about what you're doing. If it's just vanilla, here it is, here it is, here it is. Don't make overarching statements that are kind of true, kind of not true. It's true to you because you're passionate, not true to me because I don't believe you. But just make it exciting.
And I ask that because people sort of disregard the fact that you need that image.
Yes, absolutely.
And we'll logic you to death, but we won't let you feel the passion or the emotion behind why you're doing something.
Right, exactly. Passion is huge. Every entrepreneur is passionate about what they're doing. Convey that effectively. Convey it through your marketing materials, convey it through your speech, convey it through how you interact with your peers. Make your mom excited about what you're doing. Make your dad excited. Make your sister. My sisters could care less what I do. But at one point, they should have been pretty excited about what we were. Venture South was a startup at one point. But back to the slides themselves.
I got a question from Facebook for you.
All right. Hey, Facebook.
They want to know what's your success rate with investing in entrepreneurs, and if you have women, minorities submitting and obtaining investing.
Yeah. Our job as managing directors is to invest in the best companies, period. Pure and simple. Regardless of race, color, religion, we are looking at the best companies, period, across the Southeast. I'll give you one really good example of one recently that was female run, female founded. The entire board was female. The investment bank that sold the company was female ran, and it was by far our best deal. It was a software company based in Chapel Hill. We invested and had nearly 12x return within 2 years. So we love those. If any of you guys are starting a company that's going to generate 12 times our money, raise your hand and come up, and I will buy you coffee afterwards. But no, we've had good success with all shapes, sizes, colors, forms. We're just looking for the best companies, pure and simple. The deck could look really, really good, and it could be a horrible presentation. All right, so just because it's beautiful and you suck at delivering it, that's a problem. All right, so make sure you're at least good at delivering your beautiful deck. A couple of things, details matter. the formatting of the slides is really important. It's distracting if it's bad, if it's misspelled words, you're not coming back. Let's see, carelessness it's a big deal. Now, everybody makes mistakes. I am really terrible at spelling in emails. I'm always embarrassed after I press send. Almost every email, and that can't happen on your pitch deck. It can't happen on your executive summary. So make sure your 7th grade English teacher proofreads your documents before you deliver it. And there's a couple ways to look at the slide format. So 10 to 12 is ideal. There's resources out there. Garage Technology Ventures is a really good one. If you go to our website, venturesouth.vc, under entrepreneur resources, we have an outline as well. The team, it's super important, guys. It's a little bit cliche, but the jockey is more important than the horse. That's real. That's true. You're building credibility in you. You're building credibility in whether or not you can execute on the business plan. The horse, the company, we have to be comfortable in that, but we're by and large, we're investing in you as the entrepreneur. And you need to explain that. Avoid arrogance. This is a big one. I've kind of got a top 10 takeaways here in a bit, and this is definitely on there. If you say we have a world-class team, I don't believe you. I just don't believe you. If you say we're the only one doing this, I don't believe you. You're not the only one doing this, I promise you. So please avoid the arrogance. Be humble yet passionate. Mention the key advisors. This is another big no-no. We get a lot of decks from the entrepreneurs that will list everybody they've had coffee with, and the big names, or folks that they might have sat at the table with at 1 million cups. Don't put them as advisors to your company, because I promise you, we're going to have long conversations with all of your advisors. So make sure that the advisors are intimately involved with the company itself. Don't name drop. That kind of goes part and parcel to what we're talking about there with the advisors.
You had a question here.
Yep.
Do you look at the revenue the company is already generating, and are there indicators that tell you that it's a good investment for you?
Revenue, absolutely. As I mentioned earlier, we like for the companies to be generating revenue. If you're not generating revenue, we need you to have a very clear path to generating revenue. If you are generating revenue and your projections are like every single entrepreneur in the world, that's just this huge hockey stick, through our diligence, we're going to haircut that automatically. We do at Venture South, we do our own modeling, we do our own projections based on our findings and diligence. So revenue is key. Know your numbers too. That's another big part of this. You've got to know your numbers, and not only know your numbers, know the assumptions that went into building your projections. Why you think you're going to generate $2 million and you generated $100,000 last year, things like that. Q&A is after every pitch. That's really where the majority of it matters. We're not a group that's going to try to trip you up, but we are a group that's going to ask you those assumptions. You've got to know your numbers. You got to anticipate. You've got to be practiced. You sit down with the startup mentors in your community. Let them ask you hard questions so you can practice the answers. Don't avoid answering, but it's okay to say I don't know. It's perfectly fine to say, I don't know. Let me get back to you. Or how would you like for that answer? How would you like me to answer that? And then get back to them. That's common. Again, build credibility at every step of the process. All right. Kind of flew through this. This is typically a 1 hour where we kind of dig into each one of these things a bit. But as in conversation with Greg, he said, you ought to end with kind of a top 10 takeaway, and then use it to tee up additional conversations moving forward. Whether you guys can come to our other workshops. But here they are. Number one, do your homework. These are in no order of importance. Some of them are more important to me personally, and I'll make sure to point that out. But do your homework. Know your business inside and out. Like I said, it's okay for you to not know an answer, but know your business inside and out, frontwards and backwards. know the assumptions, know the model, know the market, know the exit comparables, know your competition, really understand it, and take time to do it. Sell something before you try to raise the money. That's important. Like I said, even if it's $1 to one person, you've at least sold something. You're a business. You're a business. You're not a concept now. You're not an idea. You're a real business. So please sell. I cannot say that enough. We need you to be out there selling because that's what's going to generate interest and excitement from the investor base. Credibility, bar none. That's the important thing to understand throughout the whole process. You do have competition. It's shocking to me how many people say, there's no one else doing this, or we don't really have any competition. You absolutely have competition. You are not novel. You may be doing it different, but your competition could just as easily be a direct competitor, or it could be someone that's doing something similar that would offer an alternative to what you're trying to sell. That's important. You do have competition. You need to understand the ancillary competition. You need to understand your direct competition. Founder syndrome. Anybody know what that is? That's the people that have a concept, might have sold a little bit of something here and there, and all of a sudden they think they're Steve Jobs or Zuckerberg. Investors can spot founder syndrome when they walk in the door. And that's an arrogance thing. So be humble yet passionate, okay? Cash is king. Don't ever run out of cash. The number one reason startups or any small businesses fail is they run out of cash. That's important. That's important regardless if you take investor money or if you have a hot dog stand. Cash is king. Don't misspell words. That's just a funny one that always trips people up. Just don't misspell words. It is 100% of the time, it's harder than you think to raise money. I promise you. It's harder than you think. Entrepreneurs are inherently very passionate. So they feel like everybody around them is also going to be equally as passionate about what they're doing. And that almost never happens. So understand, going into developing your concept into a business, know that raising money is very, very, very hard. And just as a reminder, we only invest in 2% of the companies that we look at. And we look at thousands. All right? So just please understand that. In closing, however, you can seriously do this. You can absolutely raise money. We have invested in college, kids that are just finished out of college, all the way up into people that have already sold companies for $100 million plus, and everything in between. So know that while it is really hard, it's very much doable. So with that, happy to take some questions. Happy to dig into anything. I know we're short on time, but fire away.
Yeah, we still have almost 10 minutes.
Okay, great, Tom.
If my company's path, in my mind, was to come through Venture South, what's the timeline generally for Venture South from the time the founder walks in the door to the time you're subscribed and out? Is that, I know it probably varies by individual company, but is there a planning timeline that you should use if you're actually going to be looking at coming to Venture South?
A year in advance. Start thinking about. If you're looking to raise money from investors, start thinking about a year in advance. Come to things like this. That's a really great start. Start talking to the startup mentors and community like Tom and TK and Greg and those folks, because they understand how hard it is. They understand the process. So start early. Once you've kind of gotten to that point where you think you're going to raise money, I would say a good timeline is a 6-month process from the time that you say, hey, Greg, I'm Charlie Banks, I'd like to raise money. Because that kind of starts the process on us. You're in our pipeline. We're either interested or not. If we're not, we typically like to give you feedback. Doesn't always happen because we see so many. But we like to give you feedback and say, we're passing on this opportunity because of X, Y, and Z. And we may be interested if you meet these milestones. So that could be a 6-month process, but from the time that you pitch, from the time you've kind of gotten past the managing director's pre-screening, that's about a 2 to 3 month process, depending on the complexity of your company. You know, if it's a heavy medical device type deal and it takes more diligence than normal, then that could take a little bit longer. TK.
Sorry, real quick, we're gonna go, if you need to leave at 10 o'clock, please do so. But because we did get started a little late, feel free, we're gonna go a little longer.
Yeah, I can stick around, so yeah, no problem.
So please ask your questions.
Yeah, follow up.
Just one more. You mentioned, you know, that you write a check and then you follow up accordingly. So if I came to you and said, you know, and you said, we're gonna fund you $500,000.
Right.
Do you write a check for $500,000 at that point, or do you meter that money out over your monitoring time frame? How do you manage that money for the business?
Now, typically, that's what some is kind of a tranched investment, meaning, you know, we may commit to $500,000. We may give you $250 up front, and then give you some milestones to meet that would trigger the other $250. That's a little bit more rare than when we would just write a check. Now, sometimes a company may have what's called a rolling close, meaning that, you know, you're going to continue to raise money after Venture South or after the other investors come into the deal, and that's a fairly common thing. You know, we can go ahead and write you a check, but you may continue to try to raise money. Yeah.
So I know exits are really important to the investor model, and it makes a lot of sense. You had an entrepreneur who came to you and was like, "This is my foundational idea, and I want to see it through until I die." I mean, that hardly ever happens. But
Right.
somebody that really they don't ever want to do anything else. This is their life dream.
Right.
How do you make money in that case? I mean, is it just
We don't invest.
Okay.
Yeah, pure and simple. We don't invest. That's not. Now there are groups out there, you know, that wouldn't mind investing in kind of a legacy business, but no, we're not a good fit for that. You know, we like to get in 3 to 5 years and we're out.
Do you have a group that you can refer off to for like a company that is actually making profits every quarter and it can grow really large, but
Right.
do you have someone that you can kind of tag team with that?
Well, tag teaming would imply that we're investing. Yeah, I mean, there are groups like that. There are family offices. There are different SBA type folks that that appreciate that kind of environment. But we got
Charlie, just on this note, because I think this is something people probably don't understand, can you follow just the 30-second version of liquidity events, and that's how y'all get paid?
Yeah. So let's say we invest $1 million in your business, and a couple years down the line, Facebook says, "I love this business, and we're going to give you $100 million." All right. So at that point, that's an exit. You've sold that company to Facebook, and that's the liquidity event that Greg's mentioned. That's we're going to get paid back a percentage of our ownership. That's how we make money on events like that. There are others. It could be a strategic acquisition where you're just absorbed into a company and you kind of keep going. You could, what's called an IPO, initial public offering, where you go public. Another venture fund could come in and like what you're doing. They provide you additional runway and cash to continue to grow, and they may cash out the prior investors. So there are a lot of different exit strategies, and we do a whole half-day workshop on exit strategies themselves. Yeah.
The example you just did, you wrote a check for $1 million, Facebook loves it for $100 million, and you initially had 25% stake in the game. So do you get $25 million out of that 100 for that check you wrote to start with? Is that?
There's a lot of different ways to structure. There's preferred, there's common. There's a lot of different ways, and candidly, that's a whole nother topic. But the quick answer is yes. If we own 25% of the company, then we would get our money back with the 25% return of the money based on that exit. Yeah.
You mentioned workshops that Venture South does. Who are those open to?
Everybody, you. Everybody. So Venture Carolina is who we do a lot of education through. So if you go onto the Venture Carolina website, which is venturecarolina.org, you'll see that we've got the summit coming up in Greenville. We've got a full day worth of workshops on December 4th in Greenville. $100, just cover our cost. I think that day we're doing term sheets, valuations, due diligence, startup board service, and missing one. Nonetheless, the agenda is on there, so venturecarolina.org, and there, you'll see it up top. It says summit. Yes, sir.
Y'all provide a template, somebody wanted to come to y'all, you provide a template so they can go set 1, 2, 3, or they have to find line based on nebulous, whatever you have, like this. That's not really a template, you have question and answer, I think that would make it. Folks who have done it before, they look at the only experience copies with the bank.
Right.
The banks don't live in the same world y'all do.
Sure.
Their big thing is, I need a business plan.
Right.
Never don't anybody to have one follow it through, but they live different, so y'all got a template to follow.
Yeah, I mentioned one a little bit ago. Our Venture South website is venturesouth.vc. V is in venture, C is in capital. We have an entrepreneur resources page. We also wrote an ebook, so I'm just a selfish plug for that. You can go on, it's $10, $9.99, and that is the template. That walks you through this whole process. So that's on our website. Go ahead.
Any other questions? Yeah. Go in back.
We mentioned about capital on your slide further back. You also had expertise.
Right?
So how does that work, the expertise part of it work? I say I brought my company to you guys, and
Yeah, great
do you
question.
provide any expertise as far to help you along that journey?
Right. That's a big thing we do. We would call that knowledge capital. Meaning, so when we invest, we're obviously, we want this to succeed. So we're going to do everything in our power to make sure that, we give you the resources and our network that can help you succeed. As I mentioned, we have, over 300 individuals, all of which have, they're successful in their own right. They've built companies, they've sold companies, they're current operators. So we have this vast knowledge and expertise within the Venture South network itself. So you may say, hey, I need some help with a manufacturer material handling type issue. Do you have anybody in your network that we can plug into? And of course, we would reach out, we would find that person, and we would plug it in. But that's kind of on a more direct type involvement is typically, if you're taking investor capital, you're going to want to have proper board governance. So you're going to want to put together a board of directors, and we're typically taking a board seat, sometimes two, in the companies that we invest in. So the board is more involved in the day-to-day time front, not necessarily operationally, but strategically they're involved. And if your company is a medical device type company, then we would want to fill that seat with somebody with expertise in that industry. That's a great point.
You don't hear that? So if you can make it through the gauntlet, what an incredible accelerator. So a software as a service company that is serving enterprise clients, there's a good chance that Venture South has 1, 2, 5 founders or investors that have exited from those companies, built and sold those companies that you get access to. Again, if you make it through the gauntlet, that's like every entrepreneur's freaking dream.
Yeah, and also that some additional color on that. So if we really like what you're doing, but you're just too early, meaning you're not quite ready to take this type of capital, but we really like you, we like what you're doing, we will go ahead and reach out to our network and say, hey guys, we really like what this company is doing. Can you help prop them up? Can you help them reach some milestones to get them back to the point where they come back through the process? Okay.
Hey, Charlie, one of the things that I learned early on that we addressed earlier from the Facebook question was, does it matter whether they're women or minority? And I share this with people all the time. From a VC's point of view, the international color is green. So it doesn't matter. Can your business make money? It doesn't matter, what gender, what background. It's all about the green. It's all about the profitability of the company.
Yeah.
Very important.
On that point, so a phrase that we use often is, we're 100% returns focused. We're not in the business to create jobs. We're not in the business to, create opportunities for economic development. That's not our role. Our role is to make money. We are returns focused, pure and simple. Now, the byproduct of that is creating jobs. It is economic development. We know that. And it took us a while to help the folks like South Carolina Department of Commerce, which truly gets it now, that you've got to create this flywheel effect. And we talk about this often, is that we need investors making money so that they in turn continue to invest in the local businesses. That means you have a conditioned investor base to where a new company props up. You've got investors that automatically know what to look for, what to pass on, what due diligence is, what term sheets are, why valuations matter, what are cap tables. You have experienced, educated investors that can continue to make investments that will benefit the ecosystem.
So one of the things, we talked about banking versus venture capital. Have you all ever partnered with a bank? Or, I've got another question after that.
Yeah. So I mean, banks love startups, but they never fund startups. That's just banks are not your friends as startups. Banks are always your friend when you don't need the money. And we all chuckle, but that's truth. That's the truth. But they're not in the business of risk. They're in the business of de-risking. But once your company becomes bankable, that's when you need to go after the traditional money. That's when you need to go after money that's not going to dilute the ownership, your ownership. So to that point, I mean, there are certainly companies in the portfolio that have grown to the point where they're bankable now, and that's a good thing for us because that means they're growing and they're quote unquote legit.
And the reason I brought that up is one of the things early on that you mentioned too, and if you have to go.
I don't have to go. I just want to make sure I'm not taking up too much of your time.
Is that you mentioned that in the southern region that the pool is a little limited, which would led me to ask, should somebody be looking at some other areas or partnering, asking you to partner with some other venture capitalists throughout the country? If that question makes any sense.
Right. I mean, there's no secret that there's less capital here than there is in New York or Silicon Valley. There's no secret there. However, there is a tremendous amount of capital in this region alone. The best companies are getting funded. The companies that are fundable are absolutely getting funding in the Southeast. So I would answer the question and say I would concentrate more on building a fundable company as opposed to the negative aspects of there's no capital here. Because I promise you there's capital here.
What's the
difference? How important is it, like the industry partnership fund, it just got raised to 9% for
Right.
technical credits. I was part of the angel investment credit, the first angel was over 10 years ago now, or close to 10 years, but one, is that important to you guys, like in terms of like being able to raise an investment umbrella for credits or credits in other states, and then does it help for other people in this room to keep up with that kind of thing, kind of on the lobbying front?
Sure.
To know
Absolutely.
the investment community needs to be able to compete with other states, so we have more to play with.
Yeah, South Carolina has what's called it's got a long bureaucratic name, but the short name is the Angel Tax Credit. It's meaning that as a startup entrepreneur, you need to know what the Angel Tax Credit is, and you need to apply to be eligible for that. But what that is that if an investor makes an investment into a tax credit eligible company, they get a 35% state income tax credit on that investment. And for easy math, let's say I write a $10,000 check to a tax credit eligible company. The state's going to give me $3,500 tax credit for that. So that oftentimes that de-risked, that mitigates your investment about 35%. So to the extent you guys have any exposure to your legislators, that tax credit is currently up for renewal. It's not. We haven't gotten word that it's going to be renewed. We feel like it should. We feel like it will, and we absolutely feel like it should be. So, as Tia mentioned, if you have any exposure to your representatives, please let them know that is important to the 1 Million Cups community. Greg.
Charlie, can you spend 1 minute or 5 maybe minutes talking about the role of revenue and accelerating those revenues and the role it plays in valuations and in retention of ownership? And I think you know where I'm going.
Yeah. Revenue. there's a lot of elements of this process that are important. And I would put revenue right, up near the top of the list, because revenue allows us to build a model to what your company should look like down the line related to these liquidity events or this exit. So in that modeling, that's going to dictate what the valuation is, meaning the valuation dictates how much equity we get into the company. That might be clear as mud, but what I'm trying to say is that with revenue allows us to build a model to show what our potential returns could be. It also builds a model to what the valuation could be. The valuation dictates how much equity that the investors are getting into the company. So sell, create revenue.
So if you're worth $100,000, you found a way to value, and that's an accurate value. I can buy you outright for $100,000. With that same $100,000, if you do your job and sell more things, create some margin, create some profitability, and get to $200,000, and this is a very simple example. My same $100,000 cannot buy you outright, right? Only about 50% of that company. So as a founder, as an entrepreneur, the more runway, the more revenue you can generate, the more profitability you can generate, the more you raise money, the more you get to keep.
Yeah.
Just remember that.
I was wondering, have all the companies that you've invested in met the criteria as far as the exit plan? Has everyone been successful in meeting the criterias? And if not,
Oh no.
okay, so
No.
what would you do if someone were, like you said, you all observe and look to see how they're progressing? If they're not progressing within that time period, what do you all do?
Right. Remember I said earlier, we understand that half the companies we invest in are likely going to fail. They're likely not going to meet that criteria that we want to see them, be successful. There's a lot of theories around kind of what to do with companies that are not successful in your portfolio. A lot of people say, you want them to fail fast. There's some tax advantages, things like that we can get in later, but that's part of this game. We understand that. What we really want to see you do if your company is on the path of not being successful is how do you handle that? How do you handle the pivot? How do you manage cash flow? How do you communicate with your investors? How do you communicate to your board? That adds trust. It adds credibility. You're more likely to get follow-on funding, meaning that while if your business is not meeting the expectations, but yet you see an opportunity over here and you need to raise some money to go after that opportunity, everything you went into how you're handling that lack of success early on will dictate your success moving forward. Yeah.
From an accredited investor standpoint, what's kind of the average amount that people are investing in for you?
Yeah. So this number's skewed quite a bit, but our minimum investment, there's no obligation, but our minimum investment is $5,000, and then we aggregate that. We combine that with a lot of people that might have said yes, they want to invest in it. There's no maximum, so we've got quite a few folks that write, $5,000, $10,000 checks in every deal. We've got quite a few folks that write, $25,000 plus. Then we've got some that write much larger checks. So it's that averages out to about a $12,000 number per investor per deal. But again, that number is skewed heavily. So there's a lot of data that we can dive into one-on-one offline if you want to know how we arrived at that. So.
Well, I guess if there are no more questions, I think we should give Charlie a big round of applause. How many of you found this